There's a photograph that never made it into the history books. It was taken in 1945 aboard the USS Quincy, anchored in the Great Bitter Lake along the Suez Canal. In it, President Franklin Roosevelt sits across from King Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia. Two men, two chairs. Between them, an ocean of oil that would reshape the world. Roosevelt was dying. The king was building a nation on sand and crude. And in that moment, with handshakes and promises, they bound together two countries in a marriage that neither could ever quite escape. 80 years later, American soldiers still wake up in the desert, still patrol streets in lands their grandparents only knew from maps, still come home in flag-draped caskets from wars that seem to have no ending. And we keep asking the same question: why can't we just leave? The answer, it turns out, is written in oil. Every single day, nearly 20 million barrels of crude pass through a waterway so narrow you could almost swim across it. The Strait of Hormuz, just 21 miles wide at its tightest point. On one side, Iran. On the other, Oman and the United Arab Emirates. And through the middle, 1/5 of the world's oil supply. If that strait closes, gas prices don't just rise. They explode. Economies don't just stumble. They seize. It's not just about filling your tank or heating your home. It's about the fact that everything you touch, everything you eat, everything you wear traveled on trucks and ships and planes that run on fuel that came through that water. The world, quite literally, floats on Middle Eastern oil. And America made itself the guardian of that flow. Not because it needs the oil itself anymore. It doesn't, not really. Fracking changed that. America became energy independent, at least on paper. But Japan does. South Korea does. Germany does. India does. Every ally America has promised to protect, every economy tied to its own, drinks deeply from the wells of the Persian Gulf. So American destroyers patrol those waters. American fighter jets trace the sky. American bases that the landscape like pins on a map of empire, even if no one wants to call it that. This is the first reason America can't leave. The oil isn't for us. It's for the world we built. But there's a second reason, and it's darker. In 1979, something happened that the American government had promised would never happen. The Shah of Iran, a man propped up by the CIA, a monarch who seemed as permanent as the desert itself, fell. Not to an army, not to a coup, but to his own people rising up in revolution. And in his place came the Ayatollahs, a theocracy, anti-American, anti-Western, and suddenly, a country that had been an ally became an adversary with ambitions that stretched across the region. Iran funds Hezbollah in Lebanon. It supports the Houthis in Yemen. It backs militias in Iraq and Syria. It builds missiles and drones and hands them to proxy forces who attack American allies, American interests, American soldiers. This isn't a war, not officially. It's something stranger. A shadow conflict fought through intermediaries, where bombs go off in one country, but the orders come from another. And America can't ignore it. Because if Iran consolidates power across the Middle East, if it controls the Strait, if it encircles Israel, if it threatens Saudi Arabia, then the entire architecture of alliances that America spent 70 years building begins to crumble. So the troops stay. The bases remain. The aircraft carriers circle back again and again, like sentries who can never clock out. This is the second reason. The fear of what happens if we're not there to stop it. And then there's Israel. No conversation about America and the Middle East can avoid it. The bond between the United States and Israel is unlike any other alliance on Earth. It's military, yes. Billions in aid. Cutting-edge weapons. Intelligence sharing. But it's also emotional. Cultural. Religious. Political in ways that run so deep, they're almost impossible to untangle. For millions of Americans, Israel isn't just an ally. It's a promise. A biblical one. A moral one. The only democracy in the region, they say. A refuge built from the ashes of the Holocaust. Surrounded by enemies who have sworn its destruction. And so when rockets fly from Gaza, when tensions flare on the Lebanese border, when Iran threatens annihilation, America doesn't just watch. It intervenes. It sends ships. It sends planes. It sends a message: touch them, and you touch us. But that commitment comes with a cost. It makes America a player in conflicts it didn't start and can't finish. It turns every regional war into an American concern. It means that even if every drop of oil dried up tomorrow, even if Iran dissolved into dust, America would still be there. Because leaving would mean abandoning a friend. And in the calculus of American foreign policy, that's unthinkable. This is the third reason. Loyalty, however complicated. But let's talk about what happens when America does try to leave. In 2011, President Obama pulled the last combat troops out of Iraq. The war, he said, was over. America had done its job. Democracy was planted. The mission was accomplished for real this time. 3 years later, a black flag rose over Mosul. ISIS, a terror group so brutal, so medieval, that even Al-Qaeda disowned them. They swept across Syria and Iraq like a plague, seizing cities, enslaving women, executing prisoners on camera for the world to see. And America went back, not with 100,000 troops this time, but with drones, with special forces, with airstrikes that turn entire city blocks to rubble. Because when you leave a vacuum, something fills it. And what filled Iraq wasn't peace. It was chaos. The same thing happened in Afghanistan just a decade later. American forces withdrew in 2021, and within weeks, the Taliban reclaimed the country. 20 years of war, trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, and it all evaporated like water on hot sand. The Middle East, it seems, doesn't let you leave cleanly. It doesn't offer exits, only pauses, because the region is broken in ways that didn't start with America, but were certainly made worse by it. Borders drawn by colonial powers with rulers and ignorance. Dictators propped up and then toppled when they became inconvenient. Weapons sold to allies who became enemies. Promises made and broken. And in the rubble of all that history, extremism grows. Not because people are inherently violent, but because when you take away hope, when you destroy infrastructure, when you orphan children and displace millions, rage becomes the only currency left. America didn't create that rage, but it fed it, and now it can't escape it. This is the fourth reason, the consequences of its own choices. There's a fifth reason, too, one that doesn't get talked about as much. The defense industry. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, corporations that build the bombs and the jets and the missiles and the drones. They don't just profit from war. They depend on it. And they have lobbyists, lots of them, walking the halls of Congress, funding campaigns, making sure that every budget includes another few billion for defense contracts, making sure that threats are always on the horizon, making sure that leaving is always just a little too risky. It's not a conspiracy. It's just capitalism. War is business. And business is very, very good. So even when the public is tired, even when soldiers are exhausted, even when the mission seems endless, the machine keeps running. Because it employs hundreds of thousands of people. Because it powers entire towns built around military bases. Because it's woven into the fabric of the American economy in ways that make it almost impossible to pull the thread without unraveling everything else. This is the fifth reason, the one we don't like to admit. That war pays. So here we are, 80 years after Roosevelt and the King shook hands, 20 years after Baghdad fell, 2 years after Kabul fell again, and American soldiers are still in the desert, still guarding oil they don't need for allies who depend on it, still countering adversaries who learned long ago that you don't have to beat America in battle. You just have to outlast it. Still protecting a country that might not survive without them. Still cleaning up messes they helped make. Still turning the gears of an industry that profits from their sacrifice. The question isn't really why America can't leave. The question is whether it ever actually wanted to. Because leaving means risk. It means uncertainty. It means giving up control. And America, for all its talk of freedom and sovereignty, has never been comfortable letting go. But here's the thing. Every empire in history thought it could hold on forever. The Romans, the Ottomans, the British, they all believed their presence was necessary. That without them, the world would fall apart. And maybe they were right for a time. But empires don't end because they choose to leave. They end because they can't afford to stay. And one day, whether it's 10 years from now or 50, America will leave the Middle East. Not because it wants to, but because it has to. And when it does, the question won't be why it took so long. It'll be what rises from the sand in its place.